afternoon. My name is Frank Devenuto. I'm going to be spending the next few minutes talking about gender-based differences within the brain. I could spend hours talking about it, but we're just going to spend a few minutes dealing with some of the key items that distinguish a man's brain from a woman's brain. All this, I believe, started in the beginning of creation when God created all things. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 27, God said he wanted to make man in his own image, and therefore he created man and woman, male and female. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 21 through 24, it says that God put Adam to sleep, took out his rib, and when Adam woke up, after creating Eve, it says that she is now the bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman. And the reason that is because when he woke up, he went, "Whoa, man!" Okay, all kidding aside. It also goes on and says that a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh, signifying that apart from each other they were incomplete, they were not whole, but when they were together they were considered whole. Scientists have also discovered in the last several years that while the child is still in the womb, there's a hormone that washes over the brain of the child. It's estrogen in girls and it's testosterone in the boys. Further research also indicated that the corpus callosum connection is thicker in the females. That's the wiring that goes between the left and right hemisphere of the brain. They also, further research indicated that within the first 3 months of life, that a female child looked at her mother's face or looked at facial expressions over 400% more times than a boy of the same age. And as they became toddlers, the girls still looked at their mother's face 10 to 20% times more than the boys, who tended to walk around and investigate their environment. Now, the amygdala is a small almond-shaped mass located near the temporal lobes. That's the dark purple area you see highlighted in the picture in the bottom right corner. This is the part that activates the fight or flight in the brain. Now, because men have more testosterone, they will more either fight or flee, whereas a woman, because of her hormonal balance, would tend to either befriend or try to resolve the conflict, whereas boys would try to fight and deal with the conflict. Now, the prefrontal cortex, that's the part of the brain, as you can see in the picture, it's the front part that's highlighted, that drives the rest of the brain. It deals with the cognitive functions like how you plan activities, how you do things, plan your day. As you get older, it helps you distinguish between right and wrong and to curb inappropriate behavior. Scientists have also determined that the prefrontal cortex is larger in women and matures faster than it does in men, which probably causes women to constantly say that men act like boys even when they get older. It also helps women to look for resolution in conflicts, even if they have to sacrifice something, whereas in men, they use this part of the brain to try to come out on top, that competitive nature. Now, the corpus callosum, which you see highlighted in the picture, that's the part that connects the left and right hemispheres of the brain together so they can communicate with each other. Scientists using imagery and other new technologies have noticed there's over 200 million connections between the hemispheres in a woman's brain. Because of the connectivity in the woman, she's able to use both sides of her brain, whereas men are more limited in that capacity. In these slides here, as you can see, the men's wiring is up at the top. It's blue because what scientists have discovered, that men tend to stay in one lobe at one time, and the connections between forward and the aft part of the brain are more highlighted than they are in a woman's brain, which tends to go from the left to the right side of the brain. Because of the way their brains are wired, a man can learn a single task easier. He tends to be better at math, coordinated tasks like bicycling, running, athletic events, hunting. But because of the woman's wiring in her brain, she's better at social skills, multitasking, and working in groups. Because the left hemisphere of the brain deals with language and verbal abilities, and as well as the ability to process information in an orderly fashion, and the right deals with visual and spatial information and abstract thinking and emotional responses, a woman is more able to put these diverse areas together, to use her intuition, to multitask, and do all these other wonderful things that women do. Research over the last 20 years has shown some psychological differences in the way men and women view online searches and also the newspaper. As noted in advertising, research indicates that men show greater attention to graphic stimuli such as pictures and banners, whereas women have a more favorable attitude to advertisements on the right side of the page, and men more favorable attitudes to advertisements on the left side of the page. All this information and research has led advertisers to optimize ad placement to appeal to both sexes. On the left side of a website such as ESPN or hunting or something like that that's male dominated, they'll put the ads on the left side, whereas for the female dominated websites it would be on the right side, such as something for sewing or decorating, cooking, baking, those kinds of things. Also, the research has determined that women prefer to do more intensive, more comprehensive searches while online, whereas men engage in more selective searches looking for a particular thing, whereas women will generally search and surf more than men do on the internet. As far as education goes, there is some dramatic differences which anybody who wants to be a teacher should take note of. Hearing differences. It's been determined that girls have about a 35% better hearing than boys due to the length of the inner ear. Also, when it comes to coloring and drawing, girls tend to favor colors such as reds, yellows, oranges, and they also tend to draw faces and people, whereas boys favor colors such as silver, black, blue, gray, and they tend to draw objects. Another interesting item that came out of this was temperature variation. The warmer the temperature, the less likely boys were able to pay attention. And it's determined that the ideal ambient temperature for boys is around 71 degrees for them to learn, as opposed to 77 degrees for women. And that's a remarked difference. Even though the boys would still be awake, somehow they just don't have the ability to pay attention to what goes on. They also handle stress differently, particularly in the classroom. Girls tend to not deal with moderate stress, and they also want to be with friends when they're under stress, and they tend to feel more nauseous and sick when faced with confrontation or something that's not right in the classroom. Whereas boys can deal with most stress, and when they are under stress, they tend to want to be alone, and they tend to get more excited, talk faster, their hands move, those kinds of things. Their brains develop at different rates, and this has been proven time and time again. For example, a 12-year-old girl has been determined to have the brain of an 8-year-old boy when it comes to issues such as math. However, girls mature at a much quicker age than boys do. The blood flow to the brain is a tremendous difference as well. Science has shown that the female brain has 15% more blood flow than the male, and so this allows them to able to learn better. And because of this difference in the blood flow, boys tend to compartmentalize or put things into a box, and whereas in addition with the corpus callosum and the blood flow, girls are able to make the connection and learn and tie learning to their emotions. Another is the way they perceive self-esteem. Because girls are more emotionally driven, they tend to perceive slights or how men react as in a negative way, and it affects their self-esteem. And sometimes it could tend to spiral out of control, where boys tend to be by themselves and not so much self-perception. Now, this last item here on the slide, safe environment, is really a no-brainer. Research shows that children learn better when they provide a safe classroom that fosters positive feelings. As we've already learned, boys and girls process information differently for a lot of reasons, but mostly because their brains are mature differently, blood flow, all these other things. And because they learn differently, boys tend to process things better in the left part of the brain, while girls tend to use both sides of the brains at the same time. Additionally, because of that same reason, girls are able to master language and writing skills much better than boys do. Susceptibility to disorders. For example, boys are more likely to be diagnosed with autism, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, and even dyslexia, whereas women, on the other hand, are more susceptible to mood disorders such as depression and anxiety. Perception to pain, which is really kind of odd to me. Women require more morphine than boys do to reach the same level of pain reduction. What does all this mean in the classroom? Uh, Scientists have said keep a closer eye out on boys. Let them play. They need to way some way to let this aggressiveness out, provide larger spaces, use more kinesthetic and experiential techniques and manipulatives in the classroom, and allow girls to work in groups because they learn to work better that way. Conclusion: although men and women differ in brain sizes, such as the man's brain is larger, about 10%, they handle relationships differently, stress, emotions, language, and other areas. But what scientists all over the world have discovered, their differences are actually complementary. What's a man's weakness is a woman's strength, and what's a woman's strength is a man's weakness, which goes back to what I talked about at the very beginning in the garden. Man and woman are whole when they're together, and they're incomplete when they're apart. However, I would like to add this one final note. The best explanation for men and women's differences can be summed up in this short and funny video by Mark Gungor. It's about 15 minutes long on YouTube. And here are my references that I've used for this PowerPoint presentation. Thank you very much.